everyone, I'm Lilah McDonald, a teenage social entrepreneur and founder of Water Us. I'm also host of NZ Business Magazine's podcast, Sustainably Ever After. Proudly brought to you by Office Max, New Zealand's leading workplace and education solutions provider. I'll be exploring the incredible world of sustainability and entrepreneurship. On this podcast, I'll be talking to guests who are making waves in the world of sustainability. Those who have built businesses with a purpose, those striving to make their companies greener, and those leading the charge for social and environmental change. This episode, I will be talking to Steve Bonnici, the founder and managing director of Urgent Couriers, New Zealand's first carbon-neutral courier company.
At Office Max business accounts, pay less. Sign up at officemax.co.nz/pay less. Let's get it done. T's and C's apply.
Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Lilah.
Can you please tell me a bit about yourself and your life before Urgent Couriers?
There wasn't that much life before Urgent Couriers. I started Urgent Couriers when I was 25, but I actually worked as a courier myself in the 80s before starting Urgent Couriers in 1989. I grew up on the west coast at Muriwai Beach, and so I've always sort of had a real passion for the ocean and the outdoors, and so, yeah, that's a bit about me.
So what led you to starting your own courier company?
As I said, I worked as a courier and I was pretty passionate about doing a good job, and I felt like the company that I was working for wasn't making the most of doing the best job possible for customers. And so I saw there was a gap, or I perceived there was a gap in the market. So I decided that I'd give it a go myself and started up Urgent Couriers.
So what were the biggest challenges of starting your own company?
I think you have got probably going from working as one of the team to leading people was quite a big transition, because a lot of the people who worked for me, I used to work with them. And I think that was a challenge, just a change of authority, I suppose, and have to learning how to lead people well is probably that. Obviously finance, making sure you've got enough money to pay the bills and gaining new clients, learning new skills. You do everything when you start up. You got to do everything from marketing to sales to, I used to clean the office on the weekends. So
Wow. So how did you manage to get customers and, drivers in the beginning?
Yeah, well, there was the drivers that I started with were drivers I worked with at the previous courier company and a couple of other companies around Auckland who were feeling a similar frustration as I was and felt like, hey, they'd like to be part of something where we gave a better level of service to customers. So that's where the drivers came from. As far as customers, we knew that on day one, we wouldn't have any customers. So the first thing we did was, before we started, all of the couriers who were starting, I put them through a sales training course. So we did a 2-day training course, and each of the couriers bought themselves a briefcase. And back then we used to sell books of tickets, and they all just started knocking on doors on the first day because we didn't have any deliveries to do at that point. So we everybody sold. And then as we gained clients, people started doing deliveries, and some kept selling. The ones who liked it more kept selling, and it went from there, and then eventually built our own sales team once everyone was delivering.
So you mentioned you found other courier companies lacking in the service they provided. What makes Urgent Couriers different?
I think initially what made us different was the couriers that we started with were really experienced and had a really great passion for delivering good service. And then I think there was a whole lot of basic things that we did differently, like answer the telephone quickly, sort of just actually deliver the service that everyone else was promising. That was our byline. Give us a go. We actually deliver what everyone else has been telling you they're going to do. We'll actually do it.
Okay. So Urgent Couriers is now one of the largest courier companies in New Zealand. How did you get to that point? I mean, not only are you also the first carbon neutral company, but you survived the financial crisis and all that and still came out on the top. What's your secret?
No real secret that I can share, I suppose. I mean, we've always just focused on delivering excellent service, and so we've managed to hang on to clients. But I think the whole focus on sustainability has really helped because it's given us a continuity of drivers. Like we've had drivers who have been with us for 20 years plus, and that means that we can deliver really consistent service. Feedback we get from customers is that we are the most reliable. So delivering high quality service, focusing on ensuring that we price our deliveries right and don't go too cheap, because if you go too cheap, you can't pay drivers enough. There's not enough margin in for the company to survive. So yeah, a lot of real fundamentals.
Okay, so I believe when you started Urgent Couriers, it wasn't originally carbon neutral. Was that always a goal for the future?
Not really. I mean, we started in '89. The sort of genesis of looking at sustainability happened during the late 90s. I was doing a MBA at the University of Auckland, and we had greening, it was called. Then it wasn't even sustainability of your organisation as a block of lectures. And we had to write an assignment on what's my biggest environmental impact in my business. And I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. You know, we run around burning a fossil fuel, so obviously our carbon footprint is our biggest impact. And so I made the decision that I would not answer the question and I'd write a plan on how I might green the organisation. And so I got an A for it. So the lecturer obviously liked my creativity. And so I went back into the office and said to the team, I think we should embrace this, because as a fossil fuel burning organisation, we should take responsibility, and it can potentially a point of difference for us in the transport industry. So we started out doing really simple things to start off with, and looked at how do we change behaviour. And we run a model where all of the people running around in the courier vehicles own their own vehicles. So I couldn't make a categorical decision to sell all of the vehicles we had and just replace them with lower emissions vehicles. It had to make good business sense for these couriers who were business people in their own right. And so we looked around for what was the most economical vehicles. And, you know, the thing about sustainability and reducing your carbon footprint, it actually makes good business sense as well, because if you're running a more economical vehicle, your expenses are lower and your carbon footprint's lower as well. So yeah, we started doing that, trying to measure our carbon footprint for a start. And in the early 2000s, that was our commitment. I think we did our first sustainability report in 2003, somewhere around there. And then sort of by 2005, a lot of our competitors were talking the talk as well, making noises around how they were doing things about their carbon footprint and stuff as well. And I thought, well, we need to stay in front of the pack. And that's when we made the decision to say, well, actually, we need to put our money where our mouth is and offset our unavoidable emissions, because, you know, still the case. There isn't really options for us to swap our fleet out for non-carbon emitting vehicles yet. There isn't the range in vans and trucks and things, so we are still offsetting. So yeah, we made the decision to go carbon neutral, and I think really when you put your money where your mouth is and you pay for your emissions, it does provide you with more focus on actually doing reductions, because you're paying for it at the end of the year.
Yeah. So how exactly is Urgent Couriers carbon neutral?
We work with what was Landcare Research, is now Toitū, which is an organisation which provides the opportunity for you to you provide measurement details of all of your carbon. You sit down with them and they do like an audit, and they work out what all your emissions are that you need to account for. Obviously, in our case, it's fuel emissions, electricity, lots of other bits and pieces, waste as well. But, you know, the major one is fuel. And then you measure all of those outputs, and then you provide them with data around, in our case, how much fuel we use, how much weight we carry, what distance we go. So our carbon footprint is measured. Tonne kilometres is one of the primary measures, backed up by the fuel data. And then once you provide that to them once a year, they send independent auditors in who look at all of your numbers, and then they work out your actual tonnes of carbon emitted for the year. And then you have to purchase carbon credits to offset those. You also have to have a emissions reduction management plan. So it's not just about paying to buy carbon credits. You actually have to have some initiatives that you're working on each year to try and reduce as well. we've sort of measured our carbon intensity based on that tonne kilometre measure, so we can work out whether or not we're improving based on our tonne kilometres per year.
Okay. What about packaging? Have you done anything to minimise that?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of our own packaging, so we don't provide courier satchels for people and things like that. So the responsibility for packaging is really with the people sending it. The only packaging that we have to consistently use is shrink wrap for pallets, because you have to shrink wrap a pallet when you're loading it onto a truck, otherwise the boxes fall off. Nothing really you can do about that. We make sure that we have soft plastic recycling at all of our depots so that it doesn't just go into waste. It goes into a shrink wrap bin, which then goes off to soft plastic recycling. So it's more about managing that waste stream. But yeah, we don't have a lot of packaging that we deal with ourselves.
Do your drivers have to do anything to be more sustainable?
What we work with our drivers is to try and encourage them to buy the right vehicles, so that we have sort of an acceptable vehicle list as far as what they buy. We have large trucks as well, and we're working on a program that's one of our reduction goals for this year, is we're working on a program with our large truck drivers to measure each individual driver's efficiency, because a driver's style of driving can have quite a big impact on how much fuel they use. So yeah, that's something we're doing this year.
When you decided to make the switch to be carbon neutral, was everyone you work with on board with it?
It's an interesting question. Initially, when we first started doing it, like we first started to try and green the organisation, some of our couriers were like, well, how can we do it? We're a transport company. And it was like, well, that's all the more reason for us to do something about it, because we need to take responsibility, because we are a big emitter. And pretty quickly people got on board. We do provide sort of information for drivers when they come on board about what being carbon neutral means, because they get asked, in the early days when we put carbon neutral stickers on the side of the cars and vans, they say, well, does this run on water? And silly questions like that. So they had to sort of be able to answer that question sensibly and obviously. So yeah, I think everyone's really on board now. They understand that it is something that makes us different from our competitors, and they like the idea that they're working for an organisation that takes that responsibility.
So does that mean you had to go through an education process to explain what you're doing to everyone?
Yeah, there is always a degree of education when you're doing something like this, because people don't necessarily understand what being carbon neutral means, because they look at it and they go, well, your van's no different than the van that's red or blue or whatever it might be. How come you can be carbon neutral and they're not? So you have to sort of explain it.
So just so I understand this properly, so essentially the biggest part is offsetting your carbon, but you mentioned before that you're also required to have initiatives? Yeah.
Part of being certified carbon zero is what Toitū calls it, and we branded it carbon neutral because I think carbon zero is a little bit more confusing, because that does sort of indicate that there is zero carbon. Well, it's not really. We're just neutral because we pay to offset the carbon emissions that we have, like the tons of carbon that we emit each year, we pay to offset. So there's that, but also for you to get that certification, you actually have to produce like this emissions reduction management plan. So you've got some initiatives that you're working on each year. And there isn't, the real challenge is that still there isn't really a lot of easy alternatives to burning fossil fuel doing what we do yet. There's a few electric trucks around, but they don't have enough range to do what we need to do. There's some electric vans around. Likewise, they're not. My couriers can do sort of upwards of 300 k's a day. Most of the electric vans are range for about 250, and so they don't want to end up 3/4 of the way through the day and not be able to do any more work. So look, I think it'll come, and I think there is, in bigger markets like the US and stuff, there is some electric vans that have been built specifically for Amazon and things that have got much longer range. We just haven't got them here yet. Yeah, it surprises me really that there hasn't been commercial vans that have been built with a decent range, because it's a no-brainer for couriers to use an electric vehicle, because it's way more economical for them than filling it up with diesel every day.
Is that something that you would ever consider, creating a van that could do it?
No, I mean, it's really not in our scope. It would be just capacity and capability that we don't have, and really there's no one in New Zealand who has. There was a few companies early in this sort of sustainability and carbon reduction who started to try and repower vans with electric motors and things and stick big battery packs in them and things, but it was really cost prohibitive, the cost of doing that conversion. And, as I said before, my couriers are businesses in their own right, so they have to make decisions that mean they're going to make $1 at the end of the day as well. And that's one thing, our customers like that we're carbon neutral. They don't want to pay a whole lot more for the fact that we're carbon neutral. So we don't really get the chance to charge a premium because we're carbon neutral. So we can't say to a courier, well, if you buy that electric van, you can earn more. The only extra dollars they're going to get is the reduction in their fuel cost.
Okay. So can you tell me a bit about the initiatives that you mentioned before?
Yeah, like one of the ones we're working on this year is the large truck drivers. They all drive trucks that we own. The large truck driver sort of individual carbon emissions or fuel use by driver. We're working on basically comparing each of when they do the same run, comparing each of their diesel that they use on that run, and then highlighting ones that may be a little bit heavier footed than others and providing them with training to reduce. Some of the other things we did in the last period was we swapped out about 5 cars that were working around the central city with e-bikes. I may have seen those. We've got these electric cargo bikes, which got big cargo bins on the front of them. And so we took sort of 5 cars that were doing central city work out and put on these 5 e-cargo bikes. And we're delivering most of our central city stuff using these rather than cars.
I was actually going to ask about bikes because I recently went to Amsterdam and there they do everything on bikes. They've been doing that for ages. And obviously all the couriers also use bikes. Will you use more in the future?
It's interesting. Yeah. The ability to use bikes really relies on a very high population density. And we don't really have that except in central Auckland. So our ability to ride too far, our cargo bikes go everywhere from sort of Newmarket across to Ponsonby and Parnell and all the central city and up to Eden Terrace, but that's about as far as they can go practically. The other issue is as freight has got larger, because there's no documents traveling around anymore, it's now parcels, the capacity of those. I keep a pretty close eye on it as well. There is the ability to stick little trailers on behind them. You probably saw those in Europe, like the e-cargo bikes towing little trailers that are self-propelled as well. So we're watching that space carefully, but you need to have the density of work to warrant that. So will it grow? It could, but it's not. We don't do that much work in a confined area that makes it that practical. The 5 bikes we've got in the city can cope pretty well with the volume of work we've got in the city right now.
Okay. So you mentioned before that a lot of your customers, use you because you're carbon neutral and they like the fact that you're taking responsibility. Do you think your efforts also have influence on customers to be more sustainable themselves?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I couldn't really give you any evidence of that. I know that customers choose us if they are looking to measure their own carbon footprint, because it means we can then provide them with pretty good detail around how much carbon we are offsetting on their behalf. If other people are carbon zero or carbon neutral and they use us, then they don't have to pay for offsets for their courier deliveries because we're already doing it. You don't have to pay twice. So that's an advantage. I think we've definitely made our competitors a bit more aware that they have to do something in this space because they want to try and compete. It's frustrating because they tend to just make out like they're doing a lot more than they do a lot of the time.
Why do you think it is that you're the only courier company that is carbon neutral? Because you'd think by now, the other courier companies would want to also, to compete, but also to take responsibility.
I think the reason that they haven't is that it costs money and they're probably more focused on profits. And it's sort of something where if you're a publicly listed company, your shareholders might not like it if you were paying to offset carbon when you don't have to. I can't really speak for why they haven't done it. I think that a lot of them have tried to get away with making out like they're doing some clever stuff when they're not really. It's quite frustrating.
So do you have any plans for the future to become even more?
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching the space really closely around people saying they're carbon positive, and I think that's where you make a decision to maybe buy more credits than you actually need, so you're carbon positive. Probably that's something we might look at, but it has to be affordable from a business perspective. Like, it's been a tough couple of years in the last couple of years. We don't have a lot of extra money floating around to do more than we have to, and we're committed to remaining carbon neutral, but whether or not we'd go climate positive, I mean, I'd like to do more things where we actually reduce. Like, I'd really like the opportunity to swap our fleet out for, lower emissions vehicles, and we're watching that space all the time. I think in the next year, hopefully we'll have a trial of some of the electric vans that are coming out on some runs that are lower Ks, and that'll be good. And then the other thing we're doing with our large vehicle fleet is, as they come up for replacement, looking for the most economical / lowest emission vehicles possible to replace them with. There isn't in the large transport fleet anything out there now which is commercially viable. I mean, there's a few hydrogen trucks and there's a few electric trucks and stuff, but the cost of buying those guys for the return you get on them and the KE range that they've got, they're more of a sort of a marketing statement really than an actual practical vehicle. And, we're not going to just buy something just because it looks good. It's got to actually be able to do the job as well.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people that want to become carbon neutral?
I think it is, if you want to take responsibility for your carbon footprint, it isn't as hard as you think. Like people go, oh, that just sounds like a whole lot of work. It's not really that much work. And it's good for your business to actually measure your carbon footprint, because it's really a waste stream. And the more you waste, the more you waste. Like if you have a lot of waste, that probably means you're not being as efficient as you possibly can. So measuring that part of your waste stream is useful, because you can go, oh, well, maybe if we did that differently, we would be able to reduce it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's something we've focused on a lot, is around our technology to ensure that we're making our runs as sensible and as well planned as possible, so that we're not having drivers go distances they don't need to go, because that is just a waste. But yeah, it provides focus on that particular area of waste.
Okay. What legacy do you want to leave for future generations?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about whether it's a legacy. I suppose you have a responsibility when you're in a position like mine to go, let's not try and make things worse for the next generations than what we inherited. I think my parents were in a time where there wasn't even really the understanding or the focus on the impact on the environment. I think my generation likes to pretend that they don't need to take that much responsibility, and I don't think that's right. I mean, I've got 3 kids myself. Well, they're not kids anymore, they're almost grown up. And I think it's important that we, in the positions of leading businesses, take that responsibility to at least minimize your impact and then look for solutions, because otherwise we're not leaving a very nice planet for the next generation.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for coming on today, Steve. I really enjoyed talking to you about Urgent Couriers. And I think it's amazing that you're not only the largest courier company in New Zealand, but also the only carbon neutral.
We're not the largest, Lilah.
One of the largest.
Well, we're one of the larger independent ones. You could say we're the largest independent courier company.
Okay. So if listeners want to find out more about Urgent Couriers, where can they look?
Just on our website, urgent.co.nz.
Okay, perfect. I would also like to thank everyone listening. That was Steve Bonnici from Urgent Couriers, and I'm Lilah McDonald. A special thanks to sponsors of this podcast, Office Max, whose vision is to empower sustainable and successful workplaces. Learn more about how they can help your business at officemax.co.nz. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned to nzbusiness.co.nz for more details on upcoming episodes and bonus podcast material. Let's make our world more sustainable, one story at a time. See you soon!
At OfficeMags business accounts, pay less. Sign up at officemags.co.nz/payless.
Let's get it done.
T's and C's apply.